The James Brown tribute singer was 3 songs into his set when someone from the audience interrupted him. Security moved toward the disturbance, an elderly woman being helped onto the stage by her granddaughter. The singer looked confused. The crowd went quiet. And then the old woman, 80 years old, hands shaking, voice trembling, said into the microphone, "I sang this song with James Brown 60 years ago. Can I sing it one more time?" What happened in the next 4 minutes made grown men cry and broke the internet. Let's back up 6 months. Chicago, Illinois. A cramped second-floor apartment in the South Side. 23-year-old Keisha Williams was helping her grandmother, Betty Jenkins, clean out the bedroom closet. They were looking for Betty's winter coat when a shoebox fell from the top shelf, spilling its contents across the floor. Photographs, dozens of them, black and white, color faded, edges worn, and in every single one was a young woman in her 20s, wearing sequined dresses, standing on stages, surrounded by musicians. "Grandma," Keisha said slowly, picking up one photo. "Who is this?" Betty, sitting on the edge of the bed, went very still. "That's me, baby. A long time ago." Keisha looked closer. The woman in the photo couldn't be more than 25. Beautiful, vibrant, caught mid-performance with her mouth open in song, one arm stretched toward an audience Keisha couldn't see, and behind her, blurred but visible, was a sign, Apollo Theater. "Grandma, you performed at the Apollo." Betty's eyes filled with tears. "I did more than perform there, baby. I was a backup singer for James Brown and the Famous Flames from 1962 to 1965. Keisha dropped onto the bed next to her grandmother. In all her 23 years, through all the family dinners and conversations and stories, nobody had ever mentioned this. Betty Jenkins, who worked as a school cafeteria manager for 40 years, who raised 3 kids alone after Keisha's grandfather died, who spent her retirement watching game shows and going to church, had sung with James Brown. "Why didn't you ever tell anyone?" Keisha asked. Betty picked up another photo, this one showing her standing next to James Brown himself, both of them smiling, James's hand on her shoulder. "Because it was a different life, baby. A life I chose to leave behind." Over the next 2 hours, Betty told Keisha everything. How she'd grown up in Harlem with a voice that made the church choir director cry. How she'd auditioned for James Brown's backup group in 1962 when she was just 22 years old. How James had listened to her sing for 30 seconds before stopping her and saying, "Girl, you're hired. Welcome to the Flames." "We toured everywhere," Betty said, her voice distant with memory. The Apollo, the Regal Theater in Chicago, the Howard in D.C. We did one-nighters across the South. We recorded in the studio. I sang backup on Night Train, think. It sank. I got you. I was living the dream, so what happened?" Keisha asked. "Why did you stop?" Betty's smile faded. "I got pregnant with your mama. It was 1965. I was 25 years old, unmarried, and James Brown's tour schedule didn't stop for anything. I had to make a choice. The road or my baby. I chose my baby. Did you ever regret it?" Betty was quiet for a long moment. "I regretted never singing again. I regretted that my voice, the thing that made me feel most alive, just stopped. I became a wife, then a mother, then a widow, then a grandmother, and Betty, the singer, just disappeared." Keisha looked at the photos spread across the bed. Her grandmother's whole secret life, hidden in a shoebox. And suddenly she made a decision. "Grandma," she said, pulling out her phone, "how do you feel about singing again?" Betty laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "Baby, I'm 80 years old. I haven't sung in front of people since 1965. My voice is gone. Have you tried? What? Have you actually tried singing? Or have you just decided you can't? Betty didn't have an answer for that. Over the next week, Keisha did research. There were James Brown tribute shows happening all over the country. Professional performers recreating his concerts, his moves, his sound. One was coming to Chicago in 3 months, performing at the Chicago Theater downtown. She bought 2 tickets. Then she started her plan. Every day after work, Keisha would come to Betty's apartment. "Sing for me, Grandma," she'd say. At first, Betty refused. Then she hummed. Then quietly she sang a few lines of Think. Her voice was older, rougher than it had been in the 1960s, but it was still there. "See," Keisha said after one session, "you still got it." "Got what?" An old lady's voice. "No, you've got soul, Grandma, real soul, the kind you can't fake." 2 weeks before the tribute concert, Keisha made a phone call. She contacted the venue, asked to speak to the show's producer. She explained who her grandmother was. Niels showed them the photos, told them the story. The producer was skeptical at first, but Keisha was persistent. "I'm not asking you to give her a spot in the show," Keisha said. "I'm just asking if she asks to sing. Don't immediately say no. Just let her try." The producer agreed, more out of curiosity than anything else. The night of the concert, Keisha picked up Betty at 6 p.m. Her grandmother was wearing her church dress, navy blue with small white flowers. She'd done her hair, put on lipstick, but her hands were shaking. "I can't do this," Betty said in the car. "Yes, you can. Keisha, I'm going to embarrass myself. I'm going to embarrass you. Grandma, you sang with James Brown. You performed at the Apollo. You recorded songs that people still listen to today. You're not going to embarrass anyone. You're going to remind people, including yourself, who Betty Jenkins really is." The Chicago Theater was packed. 3,000 people filled the historic venue, waiting for the tribute show to start. Keisha and Betty sat in the 10th row, close enough to see the stage clearly, but far enough back that Betty didn't feel too exposed. The lights went down, the crowd erupted, and the James Brown tribute singer, a talented performer named Marcus Jones who'd been doing this show for 5 years, hit the stage. He was good, really good. He had James's moves down perfectly, the splits, the spins, the famous footwork. His voice was strong, the band was tight. For the first 3 songs, Betty sat with tears streaming down her face, transported back to 1964, remembering what it felt like to stand on stage and be part of that magic. Then Marcus started Think, the song Betty had sung backup on, the song she'd performed hundreds of times. And Betty stood up and Keisha saw it happening and grabbed her grandmother's hand. "You sure?" Betty nodded. "If I don't do this now, I never will." They made their way to the aisle. Security immediately approached. You couldn't just walk up to the stage during a performance. But Keisha held up her phone, showing them the email from the producer. The guards hesitated, then stepped aside. Betty walked slowly toward the stage, using her cane, Keisha holding her other arm. People in the audience started noticing. Whispers spread. Marcus, mid-song, saw them approaching and looked confused. The band kept playing, but some of the musicians were now watching this elderly woman being helped up the stage steps. Marcus stopped singing. The band gradually stopped playing. 3,000 people went silent. Betty stood at the edge of the stage, breathing hard from the effort of climbing those steps. Marcus walked over, microphone in hand, trying to figure out what was happening. "Ma'am, are you okay?" he asked gently. Betty's hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold her cane. But her voice, when she spoke into Marcus's microphone, was steady. "I sang this song with James Brown 60 years ago," she said. "Can I sing it one more time?" Marcus looked at the audience, looked at the band, looked at this 80-year-old woman who'd just interrupted his show with the most impossible claim. "You sang with James Brown?" he asked. "I was a famous flame, 1962 to 1965. My name is Betty Jenkins." One of the older band members, the bass player, maybe 60 himself, suddenly stood up. "Betty Jenkins? From Harlem? Oh my God, my uncle played with you. He talked about you. He said you had the best voice in the backup group." The venue erupted. People were pulling out their phones. The producer was running from backstage, trying to figure out what was happening. Marcus made a decision. He gestured to the band. "Let's take it from the top of Think. And this time, we've got someone special joining us." Betty looked at Keisha, who was crying in the front row. Then she looked out at 3,000 people, all watching her, waiting. And she realized something. She might be 80 years old. She might need a cane to walk. Her hands might be shaking. But when she opened her mouth to sing, she was 25 again, standing on the Apollo stage, doing the thing she was born to do. The band started playing. The familiar intro filled the theater, and Betty Jenkins sang. Her voice wasn't young. It wasn't perfect. There were cracks in it, rough edges that 60 years of silence had created, but it was real. It was powerful. It was full of every year she'd lived, every sacrifice she'd made, every moment of joy and pain and love. Think about the good things. Think about the bad things. Think about the right things. Think about the wrong things. The audience didn't just listen. They felt it. This wasn't a performance. This was a woman, reclaiming a piece of herself she'd given up long ago. This was history happening live on stage. Marcus, professional that he was, fell into backup mode, supporting Betty's vocals, giving her the spotlight, letting her lead. The band followed, adjusting to her tempo, her phrasing, her style, and Betty transformed. The cane was forgotten. The shaking stopped. She moved, not with the energy of a 25-year-old, but with the confidence of someone who'd done this 1,000 times and still remembered every step. The song lasted 4 minutes, 4 minutes that felt like 4 seconds and 4 hours at the same time. When the final note hit, the entire theater rose to its feet. The applause was deafening. People were crying. Marcus was crying. The band members were crying. Betty stood there breathing hard and smiled the biggest smile Keisha had ever seen on her grandmother's face. "Thank you," Betty said into the microphone. "Thank you for letting an old woman remember who she used to be." Marcus hugged her. "Ma'am, you just reminded all of us why we do this." "Thank you." Keisha helped Betty off the stage. But this time Betty didn't really need the help. She walked taller, steadier, like singing had given her back something more than her voice. The video, of course, went viral. Someone in the audience had filmed the whole thing. By the next morning, 80-year-old former James Brown singer returns to stage, had 15 million views. News outlets picked it up. Entertainment Tonight did a segment. James Brown's estate released a statement. Betty Jenkins was a crucial part of the godfather of soul sound during the early 1960s. We're thrilled to see her talent recognized once again. Record labels called, talk shows called. Even a documentary filmmaker reached out. Betty turned down most of it. She didn't want fame, peace. She'd had her moment up, but she did do one more thing. 3 months later, at a special concert organized by Keisha, Betty performed again. And this time she was ready. She rehearsed, she prepared, and she sang 5 songs. 5 songs she'd performed with James Brown 6 decades earlier. The venue sold out in 20 minutes. The proceeds went to a music education program for low-income kids in Chicago, in Betty's name. Betty Jenkins died 18 months after that first comeback performance. She was 82 years old, but in those final 18 months, she sang more than she had in the previous 60 years. She performed at nursing homes, community centers, small theaters, never for money, just for the joy of it. At her funeral, they played a recording of her Chicago theater performance, and Keisha stood at the podium and said something that made everyone in the church nod in recognition. "My grandma taught me that it's never too late. Never too late to remember who you are. Never too late to reclaim the parts of yourself you thought were gone." She was 80 years old when she found her voice again. If that's not proof that your dreams don't have an expiration date, I don't know what is. The story of Betty Jenkins became a reminder that the parts of ourselves we bury, the dreams we set aside, the talents we hide away, the people we used to be before life demanded we become something else. Those parts never really die. They wait, sometimes for 60 years, but they wait. And sometimes, if we're lucky, we get a chance to bring them back to life. Even if it's just for 4 minutes, even if our hands are shaking, even if we're 80 years old and need a cane to walk, because singing isn't about age, it's about soul, and soul doesn't fade with time. If this story of rediscovering your dreams inspired you, hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Share it with someone who needs a reminder that it's never too late to be who you were meant to be. Do you have a talent or dream you set aside? Tell us about it in the comments. Maybe it's time to bring it back. And don't forget to hit that notification bell for more incredible true stories about the people who proved that age is just a number and dreams don't expire.